You're listening to episode 161, Dana's Story, Micropreemie Twins Born at Home. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so excited that you're here today. Even more excited because it's not just me. I get tired of hearing my own voice. So I had to reach out to some of my fellow friends that not have only been on the Child Life on Call podcast before, but really share a passion for empowering parents. So I have my friend Courtney Given here
Hi.
today.
I'm so excited to be here with you. It was such an honor to help you co-host.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about you, Courtney. If people have listened to your story before, they know you, but give us a little Cliff Notes version about you and what you're up to with your family.
Yeah, I became a medical mom when my daughter was prenatally diagnosed with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which is a very severe rare heart defect. And it changed the course of our entire life. We ended up moving to a different state to help her get the care she needed. And through this process, I also recognized that there was such a gap in support for moms like myself who wanted more emotional health tools, and it inspired me to become a life coach. And I currently coach medical moms and help them navigate the ups and downs of medical motherhood. I also have a podcast called Mindset for Medical Moms, where I teach lots of tools and concepts and just discuss all the things that happen as a medical mom.
I love all of that. And the other thing about Courtney is that when she does her podcast, first of all, she brings up really important topics and always leaves me something to think about, not only for myself as a child life specialist, but myself as a person and a mom. So you can relate no matter if you're a clinician or a parent listening today. But she also has the most beautiful family, and they live in Hawaii, and they like go to the beach all the time. So it's really fun to pretend that I'm her neighbor and I just go to the beach with them.
You need to come visit anytime.
Okay. Let's sign up.
My office is my guest room, and it's always a mess, but I will clean it for you if you ever want to crash.
I'll sleep on your porch, for goodness sake. No doubt.
Always welcome.
And you have 3 girls, right?
I do. 3 blondies.
Cuties. And do you guys surf, or like, what do you like? Is life really like it looks like in Hawaii? Like you go to the
No.
beach all the time? Okay.
No, that's honestly the biggest downside to living in Hawaii, and no one will ever feel bad for you. And so sometimes if I'm like complaining about anything, people are like, "Oh, well, you live in Hawaii." And I'm like, "Okay, but real life happens here too. No one ever feels bad." We do go to the beach a lot. It is a very inconvenient place to live, so it's not for everyone, but vacationing here is amazing, and it is one of the best places in the entire world. It is really simple, really slow. It's like Amazon takes like 8 days to get here.
Oh
So
my
it's
gosh.
not a convenient place. Like we don't have 2-day shipping. There's lots of inconvenient places, but for us, it always feels like home, and we feel really, really lucky to be here.
Yeah. Well, we got to interview Dana today, and she has a really incredible birth story, which kind of started her adventure into medical motherhood. But one of the things we were chatting about at the end of the episode, Courtney, have you tried, we were not talking about this, but it reminded me of this. Have you tried any of the Chat GPT things, the robot?
Not yet. I've
content?
actually been contemplating it.
Yeah. So, okay, I have because I use this one service and it's called like explain it to a fourth grader. And sometimes I do that with like medical terms that I'm trying to
Oh,
really
that's
understand how to articulate to kids, especially. I'm like, if I can use a tool, I'm going to use it. But we were talking about how in the episode, when you tell somebody something and they usually return with like, but it's fine, but you're out of the hospital now. And Chat GPT did that to me.
oh, so rude.
It was like, here's the heart defect, blah, blah, blah. But you usually go on to live a normal life. And I'm like, well, that's great. But like, you define normal, Chat GPT, like, you know?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a hard part for medical motherhood because we want to know like what is the prognosis, what is going to be like quality of life. And at the same time, I think there's a balance of like we also want the realistic understanding of what or is our child going to go through, what is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, the polite pleasantries, the cliches, it actually does not help.
Yeah. And I actually think more clinicians could hear that too, because I think they're so often delivering maybe not the best news, and they can usually follow it up with, and we see this go really, there's the good and the bad, and delivery of medical information is a whole other podcast. But I thought that was an interesting spot with just everything that's going on in the world.
I tell so many of my clients that you have to get used to hearing, well, it depends. Because
Mm.
anytime you want a question from a medical provider, they always start with, well, it depends. And at first you're like, okay, that's fine. And then you hear it from every single one, every single one. Well, it depends. And then you start getting really angry. You're like,
Oh my
no, just
God.
give me a straight answer. But it's really a phrase you have to learn to be like, okay, this is going to depend and give me the information after that.
Mm. Gosh, I've never heard someone point that out, but you're exactly right.
It
Like,
can get really annoying because you're like, okay, I skip that part. I already know it depends, but
yeah.
also tell
Uh-huh.
me.
You're like, okay, we just get to the point. The doctor said that to me yesterday. I'm on this like testosterone cream hormone replacement thing. And I asked her, like, am I going to be on this for life? She's, well, it depends. You're exactly right. What in
It
the
doesn't matter
world?
what it is. And it's
Oh,
fine. It's just part of the nature of, being in the medical world because
yeah.
doctors are doing their best to deliver information without getting our hopes up or giving us like
Mm.
exact specific things. But
What could they rephrase it to be instead of, well, it depends? Maybe like, well, your child is unique, like, or, uh,
I
I
don't
don't
even
even
know if it
know.
needs to be rephrased. It's just something that we have to understand as patients or advocates for our children because I think it's just the nature of science. And I think from an outside perspective, like before I became a medical mom, I just assumed so much more science was black and white and we just had very definitive answers about things. And in some cases we do, but science is so much more of an art, especially if you're a medical mom in the hospital, because it's literally like, let's adjust this medication and then see what happens, right? Let's
Yeah.
take your daughter off oxygen and see what happens. It's so experimental. And that's what you don't understand until you're in it. And so to me, the phrase is just kind of a unnecessary, like it's like a necessary part of the process that you just have to accept. Well, it
Mm.
depends. You're just going to hear it from everyone. And at first you're going to be like, okay, but no, it's like, it really does depend on so many factors.
Yeah.
But at first it can be kind of like frustrating to hear it constantly because you don't feel like you're actually getting a
Yeah.
clear response, but that is the response.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. That's so good to hear. Thank you for that. Well, we're going to jump into Dana's episode, but Courtney, if people want to follow along with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. I have an awesome community over there full of medical moms and non-medical moms alike. Over at Courtney.given, and I spell my name with no U. So CORTNEY.given, as in that's a given. And also on my podcast called Mindset for Medical Moms, I teach lots of tools and like realistic strategies for managing your brain, which can kind of run wild.
I love it. Well, I'm so grateful that you're here to do this with me today, and I hope you come back and do it again.
Absolutely, anytime.
Now I have you saying yes on the podcast, so you'll have to.
Yes, we're going to do it.
Okay. So a couple housekeeping things because it is Child Life Month. I want you to know that we are giving 20% off Child Life Circle memberships. The Child Life Circle is an online community for certified child life specialists. Come on and get affordable PDUs. You can get 2 PDUs per month for just a very short price underneath $20. So if you are a certified child life specialist who has been interested in joining the community, when you sign up, use code MARCH for 20% off. And parents, we have free resources for you too. So if you go to childlifeoncall.com/parents, you will see our grandparents guide. You will see our parent starter kit, which teaches you how to talk to your kids about taking medicine and getting shots and all the things that go along with healthcare experiences.
Welcome, Dana. We're so excited to have you here and hear your story. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and about your background and your story?
Yeah, my name is Dana Rogney. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and then met my husband in college in Colorado and was in Minnesota living with him near his family for the last 11 years. We just relocated back to Dallas a few months ago. We met in 2008, second year of college, and got married 2015, and immediately soon after that started trying for a baby. And our first struggle with all of these health issues was that we ended up having some trouble with infertility. After about a year or two of trying, I had a transvaginal ultrasound and found out I had PCOS. And we were still continuing to try without the use of fertility medication, except I went on metformin to help ovulation, and changed my diet and things like that, and still never had luck getting pregnant. So after about almost 4 years of that, we were planning to set up an appointment with our fertility specialist. My OB specialized in fertility, and we were going to get on treatments. Then a month before that, I got pregnant. So that was our first kind of amazing step of all of this. And there was a lot of anxiety and depression mixed in that already with the 4 years. But
Yeah,
we
that's a
got
long
pregnant. I think, we found out in November. I think it was November 25th, 2019. We were pregnant, and we had our first ultrasound within a few weeks of that. The first ultrasound was a little over 7 weeks into the pregnancy, and we found out it was twins, which was really amazing. And everything looked good for most of the pregnancy. We found out, so everything was smooth. And then at 20 weeks, we found out it was a boy and a girl. And the one minor complication I had in my pregnancy was I was borderline for gestational diabetes. I had the blood sugar test early, and I was still under the level, but because it was early on and I was close, they started treating me with diet and just having me check my blood sugar, but I never had any more issues. And so at 20 weeks also, they thought they saw some soft markers on one of the babies, which ended up being my daughter, for trisomy 18. She had a spot on her heart and a spot on her head. So we had a level 2 ultrasound set up 4 weeks later at 24 weeks. So it was really hard waiting that month. And then we had that ultrasound, and everything luckily with her was fine. But that was really scary waiting for that. And at that ultrasound too, this was my last ultrasound. My cervix was normal. All my levels were fine. Everything measured correctly, and the babies looked fine. And then 8 days later, I ended up delivering them in my bathroom at home.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like, Courtney, you may be thinking of some things too with your prenatal experience and ultrasounds and all that. But one of the parts that you're saying right now is like, what I can try to convey to clinicians is that, like, we see families and these like little blips, and this child may be 3 years old, but there's a whole story before they were even conceived that is leading up to this moment right here. So it's like, there's just so, like, you think about the infertility that you went through and the diagnosis, and it's just, there's so much that gets you before you even get to that moment.
Yeah, it is. It's hard when we have, since we moved here, we recently started a new pediatrician, and they had questions to sign up to start seeing them. And one of them was about pregnancy and delivery and if there were any complications. And I was like, I can't even write all this down. And it asked how they were delivered and where, and just starting there, I was like, oh, I haven't had to retell this for a few years to a doctor. I forget how far back I have to go and like how it matters so much.
It's an added, I think, additional stress of just relaying the information to a care provider. Like, giving medical history is a whole process. Like, it is a lot, especially when there's like a lot of things that you have to give, like birth experience, which is such a roller coaster for what you experienced. How did you know to react the way you did? Because I was looking at the intake form. I'm so impressed. I think in that moment I would have just froze. Like I have such a freeze response when I'm like overwhelmed. So what was that like for you to make those decisions? Because it sounded like you saved both of your children through that.
It was definitely autopilot for sure. That's what I can, I guess, give credit to. So I've had a CPR first aid training because I've taught in early childhood for almost 15 years, but it still was very different than what actually happened. But I think at least just being aware of some simple things like opening up the airway and tapping on chest and like simple CPR helped, but definitely haven't learned about doing it with a newborn. But so what happened was I was 25 weeks, 5 days gestation, and I felt fine all day long. And I remember I actually picked up some baby items from somebody on Facebook who had twins near me, and I joked with her that I was hoping I would make it to 36 weeks, and I had no reasons not to believe that. I just knew with twins you often go it's common to deliver a few weeks early, so I made that joke and I felt fine all day long. And then around 9 p.m. I had like very mild lower back discomfort, but I had a small body frame and I was almost 26 weeks pregnant. So it was very common to have that. And then I went to bed fine. And through the night, I woke up thinking I was constipated, but I still did not have cramps and did not have any pain. And now I like look back and I'm like, oh, maybe I should have called and known it might have been back labor, but I mean, it wasn't even that uncomfortable. I just thought I was constipated. So after a little while, I had tried on the toilet a few times and nothing happened. And I went to go to the bathroom, and that one time it was almost 5 a.m. because I'd been asleep, and then I woke up a little before 5. I did have one pain, and I ran to the toilet and I sat down, and I immediately lost my mucus plug. And I knew what that was just from a lot of research. And my husband heard me, I yelled or something, and he came across the hall, and I told him something was wrong. And then immediately, I mean, it must have been less than 20 seconds. The first baby, James, just fell into the toilet. So that was really where we were shocked. And I had gone through too in my head, like if we should have acted faster, but I mean, now he's okay, luckily, but I looked down at him and I didn't touch him for a few seconds and my husband called 911 and actually called it a stillborn when they first answered the phone. And then I remember just looking in the toilet, and then the baby, James, barely like twitched, and I picked him up. And I think my first instinct was just to, like, I knew he was at that, like he was some like alive to some degree. So and he was discolored, and I opened up his jaw and tapped on his chest for a few seconds, and he took a breath, and you could feel him start breathing. I mean, he was 2 pounds and had just been in the toilet, so he wasn't acting any, thing like the average baby would be at birth, but we could tell he was alive. And then within a couple minutes, I know on the paperwork we say they were born 5 minutes apart. So within a couple minutes, I felt some movement, and we already knew from the ultrasounds Vera was breech, but I felt movement, and then I put my hand down there and her feet weren't coming out, and I pulled her out myself. I had given James to my husband while he was on the phone with dispatch, and I pulled her out myself. And she was pretty like lifeless and blue. And I did the same thing for her, with opening up her chin and tapping on her chest. And she I think she let out a little squeal and started breathing. And while we were on the phone, my husband was on the phone with dispatch and nobody had come yet. And he handed the phone to me, and the dispatcher told me to find anything nearby we could use as a clamp and cut the umbilical cords. And I said it to my husband, and we're not in the medical field, but he just shook his head and it didn't feel right. So we chose not to do that. And we just held the babies. I was still on the toilet holding Vera, and Jeff was on the floor holding James. And it overall took over 15 minutes for paramedics to arrive. And then they cut the cords and they got there. And later the doctors had said that they think that might have been one of the biggest things that saved their lives, of not cutting the cords, because that was the only way they were getting oxygen. And a police officer did show up pretty soon after we called, but it took over 15 minutes for the paramedics, and the police officer was very sweet but very young. Like, probably, I think I heard it was like her first year on the job, and she kind of just stood in our hallway, pacing back and forth, waiting for ambulances. And I don't blame her, but she just didn't know how to handle it, I think.
Wow. I don't know that they go through that training in cop school.
Yeah. And later I joined some mom groups and in my area, and mentioned something about the birth story. And a woman had told me her husband was one of the paramedics, and he told her about a family in our town that had twins, and he didn't, like, nobody at the house, I guess, that had been at the team expected them to survive.
Wow.
That is a lot. So you go to the hospital, and then your mom, your medical motherhood journey begins.
Yeah. So the closest hospital to us was about 15 minutes away, and we lived in Mound, Minnesota, which is about 30 minutes west of Minneapolis. And so we first went to a smaller hospital in Waconia, and we were in 3 separate ambulances. The babies each got one, and then I had one. And I had a room, and the babies were first taken there just to be like cleaned up and checked out, and then they were rushed to Children's Minneapolis, which is the level 4 NICU. They pushed them in their isolates to my room, and I got to see them with my husband before they were taken to the next hospital. But they had been stabilized, and they said James had been sent to the resuscitation room at the hospital initially. We never heard a ton of details, but I think he stopped breathing. They had to resuscitate him several times in the ambulance, and then he went to whatever room that is. But then he came out of it and was able to he was stable again, and then they transported them to the hospital, which is about 40 minutes away from there.
How did you, Dana, like, I'm just trying to think about you.
Yeah.
First of all, you woke up from sleep to have your babies on the bathroom floor. Now, it also seems so crazy that there was 3 ambulances when an hour before you were all in the same body.
Yeah.
And now you're at the hospital. What were those moments like for you? We've had other moms describe it as like, out of body and like you're so out of it that you're not really retaining any information. What do you
Yeah.
remember about that?
I really think I mean, it was very surreal. I think I was definitely in shock. And I think I know the drive from our house to the hospital, I just didn't know whether or not to expect them to be alive when we got there. And I had a paramedic with me who had his walkie-talkie, and I could hear some of the conversations going back and forth, and I heard somebody say resuscitation, and so I didn't know what to expect. So I think when I got there and they were okay for the circumstances, I mean, they were alive, I think that was a very, I guess, like humbling experience, or just for us to start kind of backtrack and just be happy they were alive and go from there.
Yeah.
Like, I think I was able to somehow just be positive, because I thought we lost them, and that was, if now I realize, the traumatic experience having them in the bathroom like that. And I think somehow we were just able to gear toward moving forward, and it was so crazy just like seeing how, if they could get better and going in that direction rather than worrying about what had happened.
How long were you in the hospital?
They actually released me within 3 hours. I think they checked me and and
we all just, our eyes both all get big, like, who signed off on that?
I know, they examined me, and my OB was there, and she joked it was the weirdest page she'd ever gotten in her career. She got a call from a fellow doctor at the hospital saying the Rogny babies are here, but I wasn't. And so she said it was the most bizarre call she'd ever gotten. But they checked me out, and I stayed, and they did some blood tests, and I didn't need stitches or anything. And they checked me out enough and said I should go see the babies. And now looking back too, I'm wondering if, they didn't know if they were going to survive. So they were letting us prioritize that. I haven't really thought through that so much, but now I'm thinking that probably was one of their motives, just to give us time. So they did everything initially with me, and I also had to deliver. They had to physically remove my placentas for me, because I didn't deliver them on my own. So my body must not have been ready, obviously. But that was the one thing, my OB delivered the placentas, and then they did blood tests. They checked me out, and still to this day, there's no answer for why I delivered early. I didn't have an infection. They didn't call it an incompetent cervix. They did a ton of tests on the babies when they were born, and there weren't any infections that would have been related to me, or that they had, even that made them come out early.
I think that is such an important part to like understand for medical families, is that there is always this layer of unknown that we have to like hold space for, be willing to like make peace with, that there are factors that we'll just like never know, answers we'll never get. And it's part of that emotional labor that we have to handle, which leads me to the question of how did you handle this process of going from birth, which was very scary, getting out of the hospital extremely fast, and then going to see your babies? And what was your stress management like?
I was okay, I think, to kind of overcome by shock. I think I have a habit, which I've been working on, but just I've been pretty resilient in my life with various things and various changes, which now years later, I try to be more in touch with my feelings. But I lost my dad suddenly. I'd lost some friends. Like, I've been through some sudden changes in my life before, and I think my body just knows how to do the autopilot. But I think a big part was really leaning or letting people support us. are trying. I'm not good at asking for help, but they were like, my husband was with me the whole time, and he went to the hospital every day with me for the first big chunk of it, but he was able to not go back to work for a while. And his family was nearby, and mine was in Texas, but very supportive. And our work and friends were very caring, and people reached out to us. So I think just the kind word, the support was really helpful. I did definitely need to, it took me time. I think I finally started going to therapy to talk about it after about a year. But they were also born at the beginning of COVID. So it was not as easy to get all of the support that would have been helpful at the time. But I think at the beginning, it definitely was more just going with the flow. And then eventually I learned to kind of give myself more time and reach out to people to talk, and I joined some Facebook groups, which was helpful. And I've been somewhat active on Instagram since they came home from the hospital and things like that to get some support. But it's funny thinking back, like when we first, pretty much our whole NICU stay, I was pretty quiet about everything. I had a blog that I would update once in a while for like friends and family, but it's not even like the link doesn't work anymore. But I did a blog that I followed, but I didn't even use Instagram stories at the time. I didn't really post anything, a lot of details. I think I was so scared deep down whether or not they'd be okay. So I didn't share as much, but through time, I've taken more advantage of finding support.
I'm so glad you mentioned that you need like learning to ask for help or allowing support, because that is a skill that is so misunderstood, but also like undervalued. Like it's a skill that medical moms have to have. And it's often the last thing we want to like tap into of like, oh, I have to ask for my needs. Because what I found is that many people outside of the hospital don't understand what is actually helpful inside the hospital. And so allowing support, allowing people to help you is a skill. And I'm just really glad you touched on that.
Thanks. Yeah. And I think just even hearing the kind words, because for the first month or so, that's really all, like I could tell people were hesitant to really get baby gifts or get things because nobody knew the outcome. I mean, they were really sick for a long time. So just hearing people reach out and say hi, and we couldn't have visitors. So just knowing we had people like following our story was helpful.
Yeah, I think that reaction you had to not share at first is one that a lot of parents have at the beginning. I think one, it's like the overwhelm and exhaustion and having to like even think of what to say or what to post, and then people start responding and then you have to respond to them. You have to respond to them. It takes a mental load. So it sounds like you know yourself really well.
I mean, I'm still working on it, but yeah, I've learned a lot through this, definitely. And I mean, I put out a post, I think the day after they were born, and I put out but I never put as many details as now when I've updated things, or like I've gotten more comfortable with what to say, but I left everything. I mean, I just didn't know as much at the time either. So it's really interesting how that's progressed.
And you've already mentioned this a little bit, but I want to know, is there anything that you've learned about yourself, since becoming their mom that maybe you didn't know before?
I think I've been able to recognize my ability to like persevere and advocate for the kids and for myself, because I've had a history in the past of sometimes I was more a timid person and shyer and like people pleaser and things, and I've definitely found my strength more. And it's still, I think it goes kind of in the line for my kids, but still that I'm able to be as strong and persistent with things has been nice to know about myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then you demonstrate that for your kids too.
Thanks. Yeah.
Courtney, I see a lot of that in you too.
Oh, thank you. What advice do you have for other medical moms or other twin moms or NICU moms, preemie moms, all the mom groups that you relate to? What would you tell them?
I think one, for yourself, like try to recognize your strengths and give yourself peace and time, and try not to have specific expectations in any direction. I mean, just be kind of in the moment and do what you can with what you have. And then also, I know I kind of already said this before, but I'm not always a super social person. I can be kind of an introvert, but finding even virtual support groups, just finding people to relate to, I think has been one of the most helpful. And like for us, the micropreemies, and then also mixed with twins, it was hard. Like I thought about it recently. I mean, I love all the friends I have in my life, but don't know anybody outside of like my internet world that had a baby as early as we have. I still have never met anybody on my own that has gone through that. I know people have, but it's hard in your everyday life. And I've worked with kids for years, and the earliest child I've ever worked with was born at 30 weeks, which is still very, very early, but that's the most I knew about it. And so trying to find people that can relate, or even they don't have to have the exact situation as you, but just knowing what it's like to be a medical parent and deal with these things. It's very helpful to find people that can relate to those experiences. I mean, I'm in some twin groups, and then also preemie and NICU groups. And especially the first year or so, and with COVID, that was probably the biggest help for me, was finding those, and then the different Instagram pages too, finding those things to relate.
Finding people to relate to is such an important part of gathering a support system. Like there's support that your friends can do and support that family can do. There's support that, your medical care team can give, but having someone that understands the emotions that you've experienced is something that is so validating, even if you don't talk that regularly, right? It's just knowing that they know. There's something very healing in that space. So yes, I agree.
Yeah, that was going to be my thing, is that when you get on these groups, it's okay to just be a lurker at first, and just read. And then like maybe you start to see the same person post things, and then you get a little brave, and then you message them. And I know that's how the Dear NICU Mama podcast started. They just got brave and they Instagram DM'd each other. I mean, it's how Courtney and I got to know each other. It's like how this all works, but it's like, even if you're scared to put yourself out there, you don't have to at first. You can just watch and look and get filled up a little bit that way too.
Yeah, definitely. And I've done both. I know I've searched so many subjects in those groups to find things I was going through. And then also I've posted my own and made internet friends through it at this point too.
And I will say it's also okay to snooze them or mute them as you need to, because it's also an equal part. Like they were super helpful for me, like Facebook groups in the beginning of my diagnosis and pregnancy, but then they became a little bit overwhelming later on when my daughter was in recovery. And so I had to like distance myself a little bit. And so it's like, I now participate a lot more than I did for a little bit, because, sometimes you just have to like give yourself some space. And so use it as for your own discretion.
That's true too. Cause I will say, like at the beginning, I wasn't very active. I know I joined the preemie group, like a few weeks into it. I was in the twin group already when I was pregnant, but I waited for the preemie NICU group. And then I'm glad I wasn't so active during our hospital stay, because not trying to put offense to people, but I see a lot of posts of people on the groups kind of second guessing doctors or asking about medical things while they're in the hospital. And that can be helpful, I'm sure. And I'm glad we had a good experience in our hospital, but I'm glad I didn't Google too many medical things and look too much into second guessing what was happening. But I definitely made use of it more once we were home.
Yeah, I think, gosh, that's a whole other podcast episode I want to talk about, because I love community for that reason, but it also can become really scary with misinformation or
Yeah.
just personal experiences that just happen to be different than the way your child reacts to something. And I think that's when it really gets into like the trusting your care team. And
Yeah.
if a doctor comes in that you don't trust, like learning how to advocate and say, well, is there another doctor I can talk to? Can I get a second opinion? And really relying on the medical team for some of that
Yeah.
stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. I think the groups are very helpful for your own personal, like emotional connections.
Yeah.
But the medical things goes down a spiral.
Yes. Well, tell us how are the kids doing now and what is your life like?
Yeah, they're overall doing really well. They basically in the NICU, they both had like 2 pages worth of medical things, like they had brain bleeds and some PDAs in their heart and lung problems. They were on ventilators and a lot of the standard health issues you see with a baby born that early. But now they'll be 3 at the end of April. And my son, James, who was the one he had grade 2 brain bleeds. He does have mild cerebral palsy, but it shows up more now. His right leg, he has hyperextension in his right knee. And so it causes his gait or the way he walks to be kind of uneven. And he has a tight leg when he walks and a bit of a limp. And it's harder for him to do things like run and jump and go upstairs. But he can pretty much do any normal activity just at his own pace. He was a late crawler and a late walker and things like that. So we knew we had him in PT from an early age, but that's his main diagnosis. And then he has chronic lung disease and asthma. It's finally been a lot better the last few months, but he does get sick easier or I think he gets sick more than the average child. And he's had several ER trips for breathing and health problems. Like he was in the ER last at the end of September. But that's his main thing. He has the mild CP and then asthma, and then Vera, the only thing she has still lingering is chronic lung disease and asthma. They both talk a ton. James especially has very clear diction and sounds like he's 4 sometimes. He talks a lot. They're very smart. They love Blippi and monster trucks, and James especially, I guess. And
I'm
animals.
sorry about the Blippi stuff. That's really hard for you.
It's yeah, we're trying to stray away from it some days now. I have a limit, but and then Vera really likes baby dolls and animals. They're kind of the stereotypical boy versus girl sometimes, which we raise them the same way, but her favorite color is pink and he loves trucks. But yeah, they're doing really well. And we still have a list of specialists that we go to. Again, we're in the process of getting a new pulmonologist and ENT and ophthalmologist. And so I think on the outside, things look really good. And people say they're surprised how early they were, but we do still deal with a lot of just checkups, and it's not all gone yet. We still have a lot of appointments we go to, but luckily they're doing okay.
Yeah, that last piece that you said, like on the outside, everything looks fine, right? But gosh, you guys carry a big story with you. Anytime you meet a new teacher or a new doctor or whatever it is. And I'm sure, Courtney, you feel that too.
I think it's an added thing that a lot of medical moms can struggle with sometimes, of not everyone realizing that their kid is still sick, or this isn't a cure, or like there might not ever be a cure for a lot of things that families go through. And I think that just reiterates that we don't know what anyone is going through ever, or what any child has had to endure or a parent has had to endure. So it's always like a good reminder for me to like practice empathy and like kindness. That's what medical motherhood has taught me so much, is just to like give people the benefit of the doubt because you just never know.
Yeah, definitely. And like learning how to phrase things. And I know it was hard for me when something would happen and people would always just be like, oh, well, it's going to be okay. Or, oh, I'm sure they're fine. Or it's no big deal. Or, you know, and all the comments about the NICU saying there, like there are so many things. I don't think I would have known as much the etiquette of phrasing things a certain way until you've really been through it or learn more about it from other people.
I think people assume that the best thing to say is something to make you feel better, but I've found it's actually best to validate people's feelings and to like see people's pain, like acknowledge that whatever they're going through is actually hard instead of trying to like make it less hard.
Yeah, I've definitely worked on that too. I see myself and I consciously try to, like, when somebody even complains about just a bad day at work or something, just say like, I'm sorry, that sounds really hard. Yeah. Because especially I feel like that, I mean, it still happens to us sometimes with what we still go through hard times, but especially when they were younger, we heard so many different ways people would try to justify things or make us feel better. And that's not always what you want, especially when it's really scary, I think. And there are times that I'm sure most medical parents go through where you end up having a sense of false hope. Like you get really optimistic and think something's going to be okay. And then something bad happens. And so then after you go through something like that, you don't want to hear the positivity as much until you know it is okay.
Yeah. It sounds like that's what medical parents offer each other, is that like unsung, like, this sucks. I know it does. I'm not going to try to convince you otherwise, which is a really safe place to be with somebody.
Yeah. And I think hearing people that have been through like hearing different directions a situation can go in, and hearing people that had good experience or something and not so good, so you know all sides of what's possible.
Well, Dana and Courtney, thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing. It takes a lot of courage and strength to even go back to those moments, and especially at such a traumatic birth. So I'm so happy you're getting support that you need from a therapist and absolutely deserve. And I just think you're incredible. So thank you so much, Dana.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. If there's other parents who want to get to know you or follow along, do you do social media or open to that kind of thing? Or
yes. Yeah, I have an Instagram, which is probably the easiest way. It's the line called an underscore, right?
Yes, you got it.
Okay. It's _Dana_Olivia_. You might have to write it down.
Got it. I'm gonna link it in the show notes.
There's a space in between, before and in between the names. Dana, Olivia.
Awesome. Well, we will come find you for sure.
Okay. Yes.
And thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Child Life On Call podcast. The only reason this podcast keeps on going is because of you and listeners like you. So please join in on the conversation with us on Instagram, Facebook. I'm even on TikTok now, y'all, making a fool of myself. I haven't danced yet, but maybe it's coming. You can find us at Child Life On Call. We also have a website, and that has all of our information about the Child Life Circle, about the Child Life On Call app, and a blog with new information all the time. That's childlifeoncall.com. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for listening to these episodes and being a part of this community. We are so grateful and so honored to be able to provide this for you.